Hey guys, it's Steven, and welcome to my first ever PvP guide on the channel. Today we will be going over Pyrotech PowerTech in patch 6.1. In the first half of a video, I'm going to be talking about rotation, the best tacticals, set bonuses, and talents, how to position yourself, how to kite and do effective damage, how to rotate your defensive cooldowns, whether it's a cleave or a 1v1 situation, and how to effectively cleave. In the second half of the video, I'll be giving more advanced tips and advice for specific situations, such as how to train specific healers, how to play versus specific range that are kiting you, when to off guard, and what the best and worst 1v1 matchups for Pyro PT are. Okay, so first of all, it's really important to understand that in SWTOR PvP, there is no one way to do damage, and rotation is a relative term. Only certain classes have ability combinations that are essential to doing max DPS, such as Marauder and Mercenary, but for most classes, target selection is more important for doing damage than a specific rotation. Once you get into combat on Pyro, the first thing you want to do is put your Scorch on every target as you can easily get to. What I usually do is use my Hydraulic Overrides in combination with an on-use Alacrity Relic. The Alacrity Relic will reduce my GCD timer to a lower CD, as if I had a high Alacrity build, but only for 30 seconds. This is mainly used in the opener, in the first, in the very beginning of the fight. You want to get your Scorch out as quickly as possible so you can start, working on the actual damage part. After this, you want to choose one target to Incendiary Missile, then follow up with Flaming Fist, Searing Wave, and Immolate. The reason you want to save your Rail Shot auto crit you get from your Flaming Fist is because you want to wait for when they have minimal or no defensive cooldowns to Rail Shot. In general, it is much easier to resist white damage such as Rail Shot, as nearly every defensive in the game counters white damage. You basically want to use these abilities in tandem off cooldown, with your filler being reapplying Scorch and Incendiary Missile. For the most part, Flame Burst is a very good single target DPS filler, but if there are more than two targets near you, Flame Sweep is always the better choice, as you'll apply your passive dot to both targets rather than just one, which essentially doubles the damage you would do in that global. That being said, Flame Burst should not be forgotten, because it will come in handy when not trying to break CC, and it will still do effective single target damage. Speaking of single target damage, Shoulder Cannon, when combined with the Flaming Fist, Searing Wave, Immolate, and Rail Shot, will be a pretty good burst window, and saving your Shoulder Cannon for this burst is very strong, as it adds another possible 20 to 30k damage baseline for what already would be an 80k damage baseline setup. With the high crit build you should be running, that could possibly be 140k damage, which is about half of someone's HP. Now during downtime, which is the time you're being kited or your max range, you can't fight anyone, you should always be trying to keep your superheated flamethrower buff up. This buff increases the damage on your next Searing Wave, and can be applied even when out of combat by using Flame Sweep. If you're out of range of everyone you already have your 30-meter Incendiary Missile on everyone, don't be afraid to Rapid Shots. It's probably your worst damaging ability, but it is still damage. In a recap, you want to use Flaming Fist, Searing Wave, Immolate, and Rail Shot in tandem, and in between you want to be either reapplying Scorch and Incendiary Missile, or Flame Sweeping, or Flame Bursting. Believe me, your damage over time abilities are very effective, and there will always be someone in a fight who's not dotted, so pay attention to those enemy debuffs. When it comes to talents, there's a lot of versatility with what you can pick as a Pyro PowerTech. The must-pick talents in the skillful first tier are Engulfing Flames, Reflective Armor, and Gyroscopic Alignment Jets. Optional picks are going to be Iron Will and Prototype Electro Surge. In the second tier, Masterful, Efficient Suit is a must-pick, as is Hitman, and Pyro Shield is optional, along with Mutilating Shards. In Heroic, Combustion Chamber is a must-pick, and Torque Boosters and Overdrive are optional. The reason why Bracer Propellant isn't really as good is because it only really adds 2 meters to your Flame Sweep area, and I used it for a year straight, and after taking it off, I didn't really see any change in how I was Flame Sweeping. Maybe for other people it's different, but like I said, I didn't really see a difference in the range because of how prevalent desync is in SWTOR PvP. Impressive Tools is only a 25% slow on your Flame Sweep, and that by itself isn't that great, right? It's only 25%, it's barely noticeable. And using your taunt as a slow really isn't game-changing, considering you have a 2-second root every 8 seconds with Flaming Fist. As a Pyro PT, you're going to be on healers more than anyone else, and taunting a healer is really ineffective, as you lose 30% of the damage-reducing effect, like the 30% damage-reducing effect you'll get from taunting a DPS or a tank. In Masterful, Enhanced Paralytics is a weird talent to use, as it makes your hard stun full wipe bar someone, so it will full resolve someone as when you hard stun them. This means you can't really initiate kill potential with your hard stun, and you'll only get 5 seconds to get a kill if you hard stun someone by yourself, if you're playing by yourself. If you are playing double PT though, it is absolutely essential that one PT runs this talent, and his job will be to follow up every stun. This way, both hard stuns will keep someone down to 4 to 9 seconds, depending on when they use their breaker. If they don't use their breaker at all, it'll hard stun them. They'll be hard stunned for 9 seconds straight, which is a long time. And if they break the first hard stun, then you'll hard stun them again for 5 seconds, and it just keeps them down for a long time. Besides that, it's all up to playstyle in Masterful, and what you want to use. In Heroic, Reel and Rattle is alright, but giving half wipe bar to someone on a 2-second stun, in which you would already have them rooted with Flaming Fist, isn't that effective, especially with how many people play stun damage reduction or have it passively. Overdrive is my personal favorite talent, as you can use it to chase people around the map without being slowed. In combination with torque boosters, your hydraulics turns into a 10-second like cop car that just goes around the map and destroys people. It's so much fun. The double jump is good on paper. I believe it's called Battering Ram. But when you play PT, you'll start to realize that how buggy your jump is. Sometimes when you jump once, it won't work, and then you'll jump again, and then it won't work, and that's like really frustrating. But in conclusion, I want you guys to start off with the talents that I have like the check marks on, and then pick from those which fit your playstyle. From there, experiment with the question marks, but don't ever touch the X's. I mean, do I really have to explain why liquid cooling is like a bad talent?
Look at this dude. Wait till you see the... No. Look at the top of his head.
When it comes to tacticals, the options you have as a Pyro PT are honestly very good. The 3 I'm going to go over are Superheated Fuel, Explosive Weaponry, and Flame Dissipation. Superheated Fuel increases your flame attack's critical chance by 100% when on Explosive Fuel, giving you a 15-second window of insane burst damage. Immolate will hit for 50k or more, Searing Wave will do 40 to 50k, and even just Flame Sweep will do 20k damage. This tactical makes your Explosive Fuel exponentially better for single target and cleave both, as it's just an insane burst window on Explosive Fuel.
Oh, that's a game, boys! That is a game!
Ooh!
Now that's a lot of damage!
Explosive Weaponry makes your Flame Burst, Flaming Fist, and Immolate AoE while on Explosive Fuel, and your Searing Wave hit twice. In a maximum cleave scenario, Explosive Weaponry is 100% the better pick than Superheated Fuel. It doesn't make your single target damage burst like Superheated Fuel, but your AoE Immolates and Flaming Fists will chunk health bars around you, not to mention the double Searing Wave dot spread shenanigans where you can turn your camera, if you turn your camera fast enough, you can aim your second Searing Wave to hit more people than your first one if you missed your first one. Flame Dissipation is the sleeper pyro tactical that I would probably try after you have the other two. It's basically reduces the heat cost on Searing Wave, allowing for more sustained damage, and for it's probably the best for PvE parsing. But because you most likely won't be standing there parsing on somebody in PvP, this tactical is definitely the worst of the 3. But it's not completely useless. Even after using Searing Wave, you do get a nice little 10% flame attack buff for 20 seconds, which you can keep up 100% of the time if your uptime is perfect. Looking back at these 3 tacticals, I would probably recommend that a new PT players learn how to play with Superheated Fuel first, as it's probably the most versatile in terms of single target burst and AoE burst damage. That doesn't mean you should deconstruct your Explosive Weaponry though. You should definitely give it a try because they're both really good. Moving on to set bonuses, there's really only 2 choices, Emergency Power and Meteor Brawler. Emergency power gives you an insane hard stop for damage with power yield, which will help you to survive, right? And additionally, your energy shield's duration is increased by 5 seconds. Personally, I haven't spent the time to get the emergency power set bonus, but on paper, the set bonus seems really good in PvP. PT has always been vulnerable to one-shot hard swap damage, especially when stunned. Having a god shield every minute would be really strong. The other option is Meteor Baller. 4-piece set bonus on Meteor Baller reads that after using Flaming Fist, your damage increased by 10% for 15 seconds. This by itself is a very strong set bonus, and as a flat 10% damage boost, that obviously is going to help you do damage. But the main part of Firefall is when you're on Explosive Fuel, you'll build stacks of Firefall by using Flame Sweep, Flame Burst, Shatter Slug, Deadly Onslaught, and stuff like that. And without the Superheated Fuel Tactical, which makes the Firefall Explosion auto-crit, Meteor Baller's Explosion is pretty underwhelming after its nerf, but it's still effective in adding to the AoE machine that is Pyro PT. It pretty much turns into like another Flame Sweeper, like, you know, about the size of maybe an Immolate AoE once it blows up without the Superheated Fuel Tactical. One thing that many people forget about Firefall is the fact that each tick of Deadly Onslaught builds stacks of Firefall. That means that you can build all 7 stacks of Firefall with Deadly Onslaught within like the first second of you casting it, and then you don't have to worry about getting max stacks or hitting big flame sweeps to get to the 7 stacks. When combined with the Superheated Fuel Tactical, your Firefall will usually do somewhere between 60 to 70k damage, which is definitely nothing to laugh at. Even though it got nerfed, this set bonus is definitely still not as bad as Right Price. It got nerfed to the ground within like the first 2 weeks of the expansion. And if you're looking to progress towards something with your tech fragments, I would definitely go for the Meteor Brawler set bonus on Pyro. When we're talking about positioning in SWTOR, we're talking about target selection, LOSing, and knowing when to run away and when to get in the fray. When it comes to target selection on any class in SWTOR, you never want to hit into defensive cooldowns. This means reflex, saber wards, energy shields, etc. If you have no choice but to hit into these cooldowns, do it. But if it is possible to switch to a target that doesn't have any cooldowns up, or a target that's cooldowns are about to run out, you should make the swap every time. Another thing is you don't want to hit into full mid tanks. Full mitigation build tanks barely take any damage, so why even bother with them? There have been so many times where I just run from a tank, not because I'm scared of him or anything, but simply because I know killing him will take longer than a Nim Isaacs. Also, when you're being kited by a range class or a healer, just swap. There's no point in chasing someone off the objective or away from cleave to not only do less damage, but even possibly lose like the node. You need to understand that PT without hydraulic overrides up can barely keep up with any other class. Sorcerers, operatives, snipers, it doesn't matter who is running or how good they are at it, you chasing them is a waste of time and effort. It is more effective for you to just stay in cleave, and when your hydraulics is off cooldown, you need to make the choice to either run in and fight or to run and to heal. Because hydraulics is the only mobility ability on PT, you have to base your play around it. Your grapple is also a very effective tool in positioning. You want to grapple in 3 different ways: gripping into cleave, peeling for your ranged DPS or healer, and gap closing. While gap closing, it is very important to only grapple when Flaming Fist, Carbonize, or Electro Dart is up. Combining grapple with Carbonize is a very useful way to keep people in cleave and gap close at the same time. Be careful though, as grapple is the only ability in the game outside of Force Push and Sin Tank Pull that gives wipe bar and doesn't stun. You also need to be careful of not grappling when someone is immune to pushbacks, such as a Juggernaut's Unstoppable or a Mercenary's Hydraulics. LOSing is really important as well on PT as it is on any melee class. Always be aware of your surroundings. If there is a free casting sniper on high ground in Hutball, then you need to LOS them. Go towards a fight that's away from them or a fight that will make them come to you. When you do this, you will notice that a lot of ranged players are really easy to bait. They know they need to get into LOS, and in a sniper's case, once you LOS, they'll have to move cover, in which you can grapple them because they won't be in LOS. Right? Standing in areas that are evasive of high ground is super important on Pyrotech because Pyrotech is usually the #1 choice for ranged players to tunnel vision on because of the lack of really strong defensive cooldowns. As a Pyrotech in general, you can actually do a very high amount of range damage. Even though it's considered a melee DPS, it's more of a mid-range DPS. You can play at the 10 meter range and evade people while running and doing your full rotation on them. Incendiary Missile, for example, is a very good ranged dot that lasts for 15 seconds and does the same DPS as Scorch. Just tapping your Incendiary Missile on your way in or on your way out of a fight is a very effective way to not waste a global. Other than that, like I mentioned earlier, Hydraulics is the best way to kite on Pyro, and it's the biggest reason why I love Overdrive. Another way to kite, though, is to use your Jet Charge defensively. Jumping into a fight is very good, obviously, but jumping out of a fight is just another way to kite on PT. Don't rely too much on it though, because PT jump is very buggy. Sometimes your jetpack's gonna fail you like it failed Boba Fett. Using your Flaming Fist on cooldown is also a really good way to kite melee, because of the 2-second route you get from it. If you're spec'd into Mutilating Shards, you can also use that to kite with its strong 75% slow. As a Pyrotech, you don't have many defensives that are game-changing, but in order to be effective, you need to know how to use them. The first cooldown you want to use in a fight is Power Yield. Very similar to Cloak of Pain on Marauder, Power Yield lasts longer the more you fight because of the Combustion Chamber talent that we picked, and the 1-minute cooldown means that it's super important to keep rotating it as it lasts for 30 seconds. After Power Yield, you have some choices to make if you're still the target. Usually, I shield after or before I know I'm going to get stunned, and wait until after my shield is over to Adrenal. However, in a 1v1 situation, you want to get the most value out of your cooldowns as possible, so using your shield and Adrenal together when they use their burst is ideal. After that, you have your Kolto Overload. As Pyro PT, Kolto is very important. Not only does it count as a breaker for hard stuns because of the efficient shoot talent that we chose, but Kolto gives you a 30% damage reduction, and its cooldown is reduced by 6 seconds every second you take damage. This means that if you kite hard enough, you can have an infinite amount of Kolto, which makes you it makes you pretty unkillable during your Kolto in situations where there's healers and tanks. Effectively, you're pretty safe when Kolto is up, and like Hydraulics, when it isn't up, or it's not close to being up, you need to be LOSing and playing scared because you can die in any stun at that point. The final defensive you have is Medpack. You always just want to stall for as long as possible until your next Kolto comes, and Medpack is usually the saving grace that gets you there. Cleaving is Pyro PT's strongest point, but knowing exactly when to cleave and how to cleave is probably the most important thing when you're playing Pyro PT. Let's start simple. Searing Wave spreads your Incendiary Missile dot to everyone it hits. So, that means that we should Flaming Fist before every Searing Wave to try and spread the dots, because Flaming Fist roots them, right? So you root them, then you Searing Wave to spread your dots. If there are 2 or more targets, then Flame Sweep is what you're going to be pressing the majority of the time when Searing Wave is down. You want to reapply Scorch when it falls, and ideally, you want every Searing Wave to spread your Incendiary Missile. Explosive Fuel is your offensive cooldown, which at baseline increases your critical chance by 25%, but because we're going over the basics of cleaving, we're going to assume that we're using the Superheated Fuel tactical, which increases your critical chance to 100%. When you see people stacking, pop your Explosive Fuel and immediately try to dot spread off of it with Searing Wave. After that, spam Flame Sweep until your Searing Wave is up again, and rinse and repeat. In cleave downtime, you can use your Immolate to get a free Flame Sweep, which is also effective in not overheating. To stop yourself from overheating, if you're overheating a lot, you want to use your Vent Heat at the second flame dissipation level, which is located next to your heat bar. Also, if you have the Meteor Brawler set bonus, once your Firefall falls off, all of your abilities cost 50% less heat, so that's another really good crutch. Once you hit 2 though, you want to Vent Heat. Thermal Sensor Overrides is also something that flies under the radar a lot of the time. I tend to use it with either Deadly Onslaught or Searing Wave because those are the 2 most heat-using abilities you have. But basically, you never want to be stuck in a fight where your dots fall off and you're just single targeting. Every other global, you need to be looking for cleave to be doing the most damage possible with your dot spread Searing Waves and your Flame Sweep. Now, as a Pyrotech, you have a ton of utility when it comes to tunneling healers. Pyro is definitely one of the most annoying DPS to tunnel a healer because of its spammable root, 2 hard stuns, and grip. Because Pyro does its max damage when it gets to cleave on 2 or more targets like I explained, most healers are going to place really spread out against you. When you're playing against a Sorc healer, it's imperative that you use your interrupt on either Revivification or Innervate. Because your interrupt is on such a low cooldown and your jump also interrupts, you can use both your jump and your kick as kicks on the healer. Sometimes a healer just wasting one global will turn the tide in a teamfight, and the abilities you should look to kick to maximize your kill potential on Sork are Revivification and Innervate. Most Sorks combine Force Speed with Innervate, so usually I wait for them to Force Speed and then jump to kick their Innervate and save my Quell for Revivification. Additionally, when they're using their main healing cooldown, Polarity Shift, you need to be constantly rooting and stunning them as much as possible. Polarity Shift is a game-changing cooldown, and forcing them to use it at a bad time is just as good as getting them to use their bubble early. When training a mercenary, in most situations you need to understand that your kill potential will come in burst and not in sustained damage. Many mercenary healers will use their cooldowns reactively, which means that you should generally leave them alone unless you feel like you can burst through their cooldowns and force even more cooldowns. If not, continue cleaving, as it is unlikely you're gonna kill a merc through shield or other damage reduction by yourself. Once their shield is over, you can go in. Because most merc healers run the interrupt immunity on their shield, on their energy shield, forcing that is exactly what you want. Once the shield is over, try to kick anything you can, as kicking a merc healer cast will, just like a Sork, waste one of their global cooldowns. Specifically in cleave situations where your team has AoE pressure, you need to kick Progressive Scan, as that has the highest AoE healing output of any other casted merc ability. Be careful of gripping the merc instantly after they use their disengage ability, as most mercenaries will use hydraulics paired up with disengage, which will negate your grip and still give them resolve. When playing against an operative healer, you need to single target them as much as possible. Operative thrives on cleave healing and will very easily be able to deal with the pressure you put out as a Pyro Pyrotech. The only AoE pressure you will get against a good operative healer will be on explosive fuel, and this is why I tend to single out operatives. When you do your full rotation and just PvE on an operative healer, you'll slowly but surely get through their defensives, and eventually, as long as you're kicking Culta Waves on cooldown and nothing else, you will find enough pressure to kill them. Because Operative has so many casted healing abilities, kicking the wrong one might just lead to them casting an even better one. A hyperbolic example of this technique, which I call bait casting, would be an operative spamming an ability that they want to be kicked, such as Diagnostic Scan, then casting a full Culta Waves in your face after baiting your kick. Additionally, don't forget that you do have access to your grip and jump abilities, which can be used as interrupts, as well as your Carbonize and your Electro Dart, which you should only be using when there are no defensive cooldowns up or you have no interrupt and need to kick a cast. Evasion is the main defensive cooldown for operative healer that you need to be aware of, as it cleanses all of your damage over time effects. This is not the end of the world though, as unlike an Assassin's Shroud, you can instantly reapply your dots upon activation of Evasion. Believe it or not, Pyro PT does have access to a lot of tools that can shut down ranged DPS. The first thing I'm going to go over is taunting. The biggest difference between a good PT and a bad PT in SWTOR is how well they utilize their taunts. If you didn't already know this, using taunt abilities such as Neural Dart and Sonic Missile apply a debuff to the target that makes them do 30% less damage to everyone but you. These taunts are off the global cooldown, which means that they can be used in between damaging abilities and can really mess with a ranged DPS trying to cleave down a team. Single target or AoE taunting a sniper that is suppressive firing your team is game changing, will 100% of the time give you those cool protection medals in regular war zones. So, starting off with snipers, you really need to try to avoid the knockback that snipers do by either saving your hydraulic overrides for it or LOSing them when they do it. You can either bait to grapple or bait to jump. Try to determine when the sniper is going to reposition himself, then as soon as he moves, either make the jump or use your grapple. Because neither of these abilities work on snipers in cover, trying to bait them out of cover is the best way to fight them. When you're playing against a good sniper that won't be baited, you have to wait the entirety of their entrench to hard stun them, but it's definitely worth the wait as snipers are very invulnerable while stunned. Don't forget that when you're playing against marksmanship sniper, their covered escape grants them 3 seconds of entrench, so use your hard stun only when they have no roll. When playing against a merc DPS, you have to know that you're automatically at a disadvantage. Look to interrupt Blazing Bolts on Arsenal Merc and Fusion Missile on IO Merc, as those are the two most essential casted abilities that Merc has to their rotation. And try to do the same thing with Merc DPS that you would do with Merc healers, with cutting the energy shield, because there's just no way you're going to kill them through it. When the shield is down though, you still have to be aware of his Kolto, Reflect, and Medpack, and if you're able to kite all of it or force multiple cooldowns at the same time, like you stun them and they use Kolto, and then out of the Kolto they use shield, then you have a real chance to kill them, because then when they overlap their defensives, it's less time for you to kite. When playing against a sorcerer, first identify what specialization they are. If they're Madness, look to kick or grip them on their Force Leech or Force Lightning cast, as kicking either of these abilities will be a major DPS loss for them. Against a Lightning Sorc, Thundering Blast and Crushing Darkness are what you want to kick, with Crushing Darkness taking priority if they're running the popular Stormwatch tactical. Finding a Sorc DPS is probably the easiest of all three, because most Sorcerer DPSs that get kicked usually just run away from you, and as long as you jump but not commit to them, it will be enough to send them packing. When any ranged DPS is tunneling you, you want to use the map to your advantage. Especially because PT is so vulnerable to ranged DPS, it is undoubtedly the most important part of playing versus a ranged spec. Many times you'll find yourself in a situation where you kick them on the most important cast, you've gotten them to around 40 to 60% HP, but now they're just kiting you. Don't be afraid to just LOS unless you have Hydraulic Overrides or Grapple. Without either of these abilities, any ranged class will kite you to infinity and beyond. As a PT, you have the ability to guard people. Although guard seems more like a tanking thing than a DPS thing, off-guarding can be very strong in helping your team recover from bad situations. Essentially what you're doing when you off-guard is trading your cooldowns for your team's survival. As a Pyro PT, you can off-guard until your Kolto has run up, then you have to drop it. As long as you're cycling your defensives the way I explained earlier, you should be okay in most situations. Let this be said though, if you're playing alone, never off-guard anyone. Off-guarding is something that both people should be ready for, and sometimes guarding a random teammate might just get you killed faster than you want because they're not using their own defenses correctly. But when paired with good defensive cooldown usage from both players, off-guarding can and will save you and your teammates from a lot of bad situations. So, we finally reached the final part of the guide, which is what the best and worst 1v1 matchups are for Pyro PT. Starting from best to worst, I would probably put them in this order: Assassins, other power techs, Juggernauts, Snipers, Marauders, Mercenaries, Sorcerers, and then Operatives. Against an Assassin, you need to kite their Shroud, and you don't really want to fight them when they have their Force Cloak up, as their Force Cloak gives them another 2 seconds of Shroud if they run the talent for it. And if they have the tactical for double re-stealth, they're going to have like 9 seconds of just straight immunity on you, so you just need to be really careful of kiting that Force Shroud. Against other PTs, you need to use your Hydraulics to kite their Energy Shield, and obviously only burst with Explosive Fuel. You want to save your Medpack for a rainy day. Past those two, every class in a 1v1 is an uphill battle, and you have to outplay to win by cutting their defensives and making the most of your own. Against a Juggernaut, Rapid Shots easily removes their enraged defense in one global cooldown, and all of your yellow damage goes through all of their defensives. Against a Sniper, you want to LOS spam until they have no roll, and then go in, force diversion, and get out as fast as possible. You only want to use Explosive Fuel when there's no diversion only, and you need to save both of your breakers for your burst window. Against a Marauder, you want to let them use Predation as they're fighting you at melee range, and then survive long enough until it ends. Once it ends, you need to kite their defensives with your Hydraulics and use Explosive Fuel. You want to use your Hard Stun Electro Dart defensively and your Carb offensively. When you're 1v1ing a Mercenary, the first thing you want to do is cry in a corner, and then try to LOS their shield by forcing Reflect early, or try to force Reflect early, and just keep hit and running them until they're out of DCDs. Once it's all over, give yourself a pat on the back as you've just beaten Nightmare Mode Isaacs by yourself. As when you're fighting a Sorcerer, you want to fight in easy to LOS places like I've explained throughout the video, and hit and run until they bubble, and then out of bubble, Hard Stun, and Carbonize, and you should win. Against an Operative, you should honestly just run away. You're never going to 1v1 a Concealment Operative in the current state that they're in. Against Lethality, you can Hard Stun and Force Breaker, and then try to win with a cheesy Carb. But 1v1ing an Operative is honestly like trying to fix your microwave by putting shiny things in it. Sounds fun to do when you're drunk, but then the house fire says otherwise. Either way, this list is purely my opinion and is subject to change, but as of right now in regular Warzones, this list seems to be what's easiest and hardest for my Pyrotech to 1v1. My reasons for the list could go on for hours, but I really just wanted to give you guys my 2 cents on it. So, that's it, right? Well, not really. There's a lot more in-depth I could go into about what to do against certain classes in certain situations, but for now, I'll leave the guide at this. I hope you guys learned something about Pyrotech in this video, and I hope that you share it with anyone trying to learn it. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This took me a long time to edit, so I really do appreciate those of you who stayed throughout the whole thing. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments section whether or not I should make another class guides for PvP, and make sure to go follow my stream at twitch.tv/averagestv. Peace!